It is therefore ordered and adjudged and decreed that the defendant Henry Earl Dinkins is guilty of the offense of, under count 1, murder in the first degree in violation of Iowa Code Section 707.2, paren 1, paren B, and guilty under count 2, kidnapping first degree in violation of Iowa Code Section 710.2.
And welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. There you see convicted sex offender Henry Dinkins, now convicted of first-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping in the shooting death of 10-year-old Breasia Terrell. She was the half-sister of the defendant's son. And the interesting part of this case was Dinkins opting for a bench trial, which is why there was such a delay between the end of the trial and today's reading of the verdict from the judge. And he had placed his hands in the fate of Judge Henry Latham, who gave him those double convictions there. He hasn't been sentenced yet. Just to give you the backstory on this, Terrell went missing back in July of 2020. She's staying overnight at Dinkins' apartment. And her remains were discovered about a year later by some fishermen in a nearby secluded pond. Dinkins' girlfriend, Andrea Culberson, testified during the trial that she had seen this young girl standing outside next to the defendant's car in the early morning hours of July 10th. That would be the last time that anyone ever saw Terrell alive. The sentencing is scheduled for October 11th, looking like life in prison without the possibility of parole, because in Iowa that happens to be the only choice. No discretion with the judge on that particular point. Katherine Lizardo is here, and also Bob Motta. So, I think when we saw this case unfold, guys, we saw where it was heading, and one of the big questions was always, was that the right move to go with a bench versus a jury trial? Let me get your take on that, Bob. What do you think?
In retrospect, no.
Yeah.
It's always scary. It's always a scary proposition to go. Like, the way that I've always viewed it in terms of trying to advise my client whether or not they should go bench or jury is if it's a complicated legal concept or we're trying to put forth a defense that might get lost on the jurors, sometimes in that case, or if I've got multiple victims at different times where, I'm not so sure that a jury will ever buy the fact that if multiple people are coming and saying that somebody did something to them, that they're ever going to buy that all of them are lying. Like in that type of situation, I said, well, we might be better off just going with a bench trial. In a situation like this, I probably would have not opted to advise my client to go bench. I probably would have said, we have a better chance going jury here. But it's a gut call. Ultimately, it was the defendant's call. I'm sure his attorneys gave him some advice, but ultimately it was his call. Who knows if he's that smartest guy in the room, client, and he knows best. Well, maybe he didn't.
Yeah, I've seen it so many times in business litigation where, you just get started with your case and the jury will be glazing over. It's just so boring and so complex. They have no interest and you're doomed. Let the judge work his way through that. But Katherine, I thought in this case, maybe in the defendant's mind, he's thinking this is, emotional. It's the death of a young child, and it's a kind of a gruesome case in terms of finding the body so much later. Maybe it's so emotional that instead of trying to sway one of 12, I'll get a judge that just feels that there's not enough there. I don't know. I'm not sure what he was thinking, but that's the best I could come up with.
I think that's a good argument because of the background of the defendant here. In 1990, he pleaded guilty to sexual abuse of a 5-year-old when he was 17 years old. So that's hanging in his head as, of course, it's prejudicial to introduce to a jury if this was a jury because of how far along that was. And maybe he was hoping that the judge, who obviously knows about that background, would have the liberty and the skill to put that aside. But I think here in this case, with the evidence that the prosecution presented, whether or not it was in front of this judge or the jury, the outcome would have been the same. And the key evidence that I find helpful for the state is DL testified during his cross-examination, meaning by the defense, that that he saw his father shoot Breasia on the day that she disappeared, and then they found her remains with a gunshot wound.
Yeah, I mean, that was bizarre. I mean, to see that kind of revelation by DL, who was the brother, to say, not only was I there, but oh yeah, I saw the defendant, my dad, shoot her. And you know, the prosecution probably would have liked to have known that earlier in the process, but it came out when it did, and I think you're right, Katherine. I think certainly had an impact on anybody trying the facts of this case. So again, Mr. Dinkins found guilty of both the murder and the kidnapping. Life without the possibility of parole is the mandatory required sentence in Iowa. That'll be handed out in a few weeks on the 11th of October. So, got another trial that we've been covering for you. This one's brand new. This is out of Florida. They're just getting into this case against Jonathan Quillis. This is a case in which, and it is a death penalty case, by the way. See that picture of him there? Take a look at him when you see him in the courtroom. A little cleaned up. This guy's accused of murdering his pregnant niece, 16-year-old Ayanna Sawyer. Let's go over to that case, see what's going on. On the stand has been Detective Shannon Lillard. Last time we checked in with her, she was pouring through garbage at the dump because that's where they believe the body was dumped but never found. Let's go back.
And some shovels, and they're sifting through and pulling through things to remove the top layer to get to any items that would be underneath the layers of debris. Just think of going through your trash. You can do it with your hand. So you drop something in there, a receipt that you're looking for. You would slowly go through the trash. Well, we're doing that same type thing, but with rakes. We're going slowly from the top to the bottom.
Now, was there any guidance to the other JSO personnel of what to look for?
Yes, ma'am. Prior to beginning our digging each day, we had a briefing down at the bottom of the search area, and either myself or one of the detectives would tell them, this is what we're looking for. We told them we could be looking for bones because the landfill, if there was a body in there, the decomposition would be a lot faster than if it was, cold, because this was in the wintertime outside. So we could be looking for bones. We're looking for a bag that might have contained women's clothing, possibly school books or things like that that would belong to a school-age child or, 16-year-old.
A teenage child?
Teenage child,
that's
thank you.
in high school?
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I know there's a lot going on here. Yes, ma'am. And again, we're going to just fast forward a little bit here. 1R, we're looking at some more piles, same in 1S. Now, can you describe 1T for us?
In this photograph, the excavator driver had already pulled some and was standing by until we had cleared, we'll say, the 6 piles that he had already brought up. He's ready with number 7 per se. And then once we had searched all those 6 piles that were already up there, a bulldozer would then push that off to the side, and then he would lay 6 more piles. So he's just standing by with a group that he had just brought up from the debris field that we were looking at.
Now, and we'll see this probably some drone pictures a little bit later, but when each time a pile is brought, is it put in a separate location from a different pile?
Yes, ma'am.
Again, states 1U. Is that just showing, of course, the dumping of the next pile by the excavator?
Yes, ma'am.
Again, in states 1B, same premise. States 1W. Is this at the top then of that landfill where you were grabbing items from?
Yes, ma'am. That's the beginning of the search, and he was bringing it from the area of interest that we had started doing our excavating. That's him bringing that first one out to us, or one of the first ones out to us.
Again, a closer view of taking items for sifting, and that's 1X. Now, in 1Y, can you describe this picture?
In this photograph, we have Coxwell employees of the Otisville landfill, and you have some JSO detectives to the right. They keep records of where they bring things, and he brought us to the area. This should be the search area that you're looking for of a dumpster that would have come from the junkyard on Main Street. So they keep records, and he was saying it was this area that basically your stuff should be if you're collecting anything from that dumpster on the time frame that we had.
And in States 1Z, again, is this worker sifting. Now, in States 1AA, was there something that potentially was of interest initially?
Yes, ma'am. As they were searching, they found some plastic that had red stains on it. And when they found it, they stopped, called me over, and I investigated it, and I tested those red stains to see if it was blood.
And what was the testing results?
It was negative for blood.
And again, there's just a couple pictures of, again, showing what you had done. This is include, again, medium viewpoints and close viewpoints of the item that you tested for potentially blood.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, they thought they had something, but it was not blood as it might have been, and they continue to look for Ayanna Sawyer. I tell you, when you have a bad day at work, just think of doing that work every day for a number of days looking for this little girl's body. Brutal. Let's take a break. We'll come back. More on the other side. This is Law and Crime.